What's good, guys? This is KY, not Kai the Creative. And 6 months ago, I bought a camera. I bought the Canon C200. Now, I was looking to get more into cinema. I had the Blackmagic Pocket 4K, and I considered this an upgrade. I wanted to use more of the features that were on there. There's some things I liked about the Pocket 4K, but I inevitably chose to go with the Canon C200. And after 6 years, after the Canon C70 already dropping, after the Red Komodo already dropping, after all of these really high quality cameras coming out, almost directly after I got the C200, it begs the question if the C200 is actually worth it in 2021. And I think it is, so we're gonna get into it. So 6 months ago, when I went to go buy the C200, I didn't buy it new. And I think one of the big things people have to realize is that when you're purchasing some of these cameras, the aftermarket game is probably gonna be your best friend. When you go into the aftermarket for certain cameras, there's some really good cameras. There's good bodies, there's good lenses that you can get on the aftermarket market per se, and you don't have to spend all the money, right? So as it stands right now, if you could still get the Canon C200, it's about the exact same price as another camera everyone's talked about, and the Canon C70. And they're the exactly identical price. However, if you go to the aftermarket, because people want to get the new thing, they want to get the new camera, they're very quick to sell their bodies in exchange to getting the C70, which gives you an opportunity to actually save a lot of money when buying those cameras. In terms of buying a camera, buying something that's a little bit older, that still has great image quality, maybe just look at buying it used. Maybe look at the aftermarket, because it might be a big benefit for you to pick up some of those cameras as opposed to trying to buy them brand new. The second thing that I really liked about buying the C200, and after 6 months of using, is the lens choices. With the lenses that are out right now, it's super easy for me to borrow 7200 2.8L lenses. I could borrow a 16-40. There's just a wide variety of lenses that after my 6 months of using it, I was able to use. I could always have my friends on set that had Canon EF glass that didn't necessarily have R glass, and I could mount that to my camera and it would work just fine. So after my 6 months of using it, and from the videos that I use, like, I might only use a couple different lenses here and there. I don't have a really wide variety of lenses that I use, but it's super easy that when I was on set and I had people that were helping me out and things like that, if they had Canon glass, I was able to use that too. So in that 6 months, like in the time that I was filming something, maybe there was like a certain focal length that I didn't have. Maybe I needed a 35mm, but I only had like a 24, 15, and 85 at the time. And it was super easy to just borrow somebody's EF glass. So in that time frame, like when you're getting cameras that might not be the newest, latest, and greatest in some of these older mounts, it's super nice to be able to like look on to be able to borrow or rent other pieces of glass or other gear that's compatible with yours, because the new stuff just hasn't got up there yet in terms of the stuff that you can add onto it, the accessories of the lenses and things like that. Another thing is the image. Now, I get it. The Canon C70 is great. The Red Komodo is great. The new Pocket 6K Pro is awesome. Canon still has really good quality. You can't really argue with Canon color. I mean, everyone talks about how good Canon's color science is. They're always really quick to like big up that as kind of the main selling feature, and it's true. Like the color that comes out of the Canon cameras right off the bat look really good. But on top of that, you're also getting the raw features too. In 4K 24 frames a second, you're getting 12-bit 4K raw, which you don't get in a lot of cameras at that price point, right? Like even the R5, which I'm actually filming on now, and we'll talk about later, doesn't offer that type of image quality, and it looks really good. Like the mirrorless cameras look really good now, but to be able to have that, to be able to have those manual adjustments when I put things in DaVinci, they look good. They look really good. It's something that I liked. I was coming from the Pocket 4K system where you had a flavor of RAW, so to be able to now kind of integrate that with the Canon C200 workflow, that was great, and I like that a lot. And I think that's for myself in terms of a camera that's a little bit cheaper, that's a cinema camera and has all those pro features that you want in a cinema camera at that price point. If you're looking at the aftermarket and to get that image quality, for me, the last 6 months with this camera has been great. Like I've had really good shoots. I've been able to shoot in places where there was a lot of light, places where there wasn't a lot of light, and the features that are on it, for me, it makes it super easy for me to do my job. For me, I do a lot of fitness videos, I do a lot of high intensity moving content and things like that, and a lot of the times I like to have it a little bit cleaner in the edits. So one of the things I what I like a lot is the image looks good and the colors are good, because sometimes that is the feature that reels in your stories, it reels in some of your content too. It's just having it look really good and really crisp, especially if you're going for a more clinical, cleaner edit, which I'm starting to gravitate a little bit towards. I don't really like using a lot of transitions and things like that. So when I want to have that cleanliness, you know what I mean, I want to have that crispy image, I lean on the C200 for that because it offers that in a camera that's not incredibly expensive as far as cinema cameras go. Another thing, and I mean other cameras offer these as well, but another thing that I like about the Canon C200, obviously the price point, the image are great, having RAW is awesome, but something that no one really talks about is its its proxy workflow. So if you're working with these RAW files, you're working with these big gigantic files, it's a hassle to have to go into your computer and go offload the files and transcode them and have all those things done. And it takes a lot from your workflow. It takes up time. If you have a slower computer, sometimes it takes hours or days just to transcode footage even before you start working on it. What I like about the C200 and why it was a big thing for me coming from the Pocket 4K is that it actually had a proxy workflow. So you can turn on a feature called sub-recording format, and it'll actually make your proxy files while you're shooting. It'll record to another SD card, you pop it in the back of your computer, and now you have proxy files for your raw images that you had shot before. And they're super easy to move around. Like you just have to rename the file by taking an underscore out, and essentially you have proxy files already made for you, saving you a bunch of time. So in terms of, for me, for my workflow, sometimes I have things that are a really quick turnaround and I don't have the time to put things on my computer and have the proxies being made or have it transcoded, or sometimes I want to see what an image looks like right off the bat and show my clients on a bigger screen. I can just take my SD card, my proxies on it, pop that in, and it starts to play those, and they're easy files to work with as well. So if you're using Adobe Premiere Pro, if you're using DaVinci Resolve, or if you're even using Final Cut Pro, having a proxy workflow makes your life a heck of a lot easier, and you get to still retain a lot of the image quality that you would get from a camera that shoots 12-bit 4K RAW on the Canon C200 with gray colors and things like that too. I feel like after everything that we've had with cameras and stuff like that, and this is some of the biggest camera releases that we've had in a long time in terms of the leaps and bounds they've gone through in technology, but I kind of start to think that maybe there's not that much difference between going camera to camera. When the C200 came out and they had a camera that was affordable relatively as far as cinema cameras go, that had built-in ND filters, and you're able to put full XLR into it, and you had all of these features, that was a groundbreaking experience for a lot of people. And I think now what's happened is now there's a lot of nuance between camera bodies. Like there's not a giant difference between getting a C70 and a Red Komodo and some of these new cameras that have come out. They're all great cameras, they all have great features, but I think the separation between them in terms of what determines a good camera is so small. It's so much smaller now than it was years ago. So for me personally, if you're looking for a camera that doesn't cost a ton of money, has a really, really great image, it has those features like built-in NDs, you have the 4K, the 4K RAW that looks great. So if you're putting it into post or you're submitting it to somewhere or submitting it to a colorist and things like that, they'll be able to work with that footage as well. All of those features that you want in a cinema camera, and you still want to be able to use some of the older glass, because I know for me personally, I just had switched over to Canon, and it's so much easier to use EF mount glass instead of going and searching for R glass and then finding an adapter for it, then finding an ND filter adapter for it, and all of those things. If you're looking to enter that market with having something that has great image quality and doesn't take you down too much in the price tag, I still recommend having the C200 in 2021. Now, the problem is in a lot of places is that they don't really offer the C200 anymore. You might not be able to get a camera that's quite like this. I would say look at your aftermarkets. A lot of people recommend their cameras and stuff like that, and sometimes even when you take the camera recommendation, it just might be worth it to just look for it in the aftermarket. But we're going to talk about things that I don't like, because I don't like unbiased conversation. So here's some of the things that I wish I had that the C200 does not have. For one, CFast costs a lot, bro. Realistically, like when you're buying these CFast cards, like it went from buying like $60, $70 SD cards that you're used to in like your Sony cameras or your other cameras that are available, but now CFast cards are getting in the hundreds of dollars. You could buy $1,000 memory systems, which for me personally, that adds up a lot, especially if I have longer shoots and things like that. Buying storage and things like that is incredibly expensive. It's one of those things that you have to deal with when you're shooting with a cinema camera, but I wish there was kind of like how there was in the R5, where they have the smaller CFast cards, and I also just wish they were cheaper. So, I mean, I guess that's not necessarily a Canon fault, but I guess it is a fault that like the file sizes, because they're such high quality, the file sizes are so big, and I need to get more space all the time. Another thing that like I wish the Canon C200 had that some other cameras actually do have, and that might influence my decision to buy them later on in the future, is that there's no middle ground in your shooting mode. So for me personally, when I'm doing some of the work that I'm doing, a lot of it might not be a full production film. Sometimes my clients just need social media content and don't necessarily require me to shoot in 12K RAW, 24 frames a second and all that other stuff. And sometimes I just want something that's simple, that's super quick, and they're willing to just have that on a quicker turnaround time. They don't really have an in-between between RAW and the 8-bit codec. So you're either going to deal with like the 4K 12-bit RAW that looks amazing, or this 8K file, which still looks pretty good, but it's just like there's nothing in the middle. I wish it had some sort of 10-bit codec that was available for it that wasn't the 4K 60 frames a second, like maybe something that's in between, maybe something that's like not RAW for quicker social media projects, but still have the ability to have good dynamic range and color. But that's just not offered. So I kind of wish they had that. It kind of turns you into that first point and using a lot of storage space, because sometimes you want something that look really good, you have to go and buy extra storage space to accommodate for that quality. So that's like the other thing that I'm not crazy about on the C200. The Canon C200 could improve on is shadows. So if you guys have owned a C200 before, you've probably heard about the idea that, like, or not the idea, the fact that the shadows can get very, very noisy. There are a couple of videos, a couple of resources to help that you could auto black balance, things like that. But even when I do that before every shoot, I still find that my shadows can get really, really noisy. So one of the things that, despite it having great image quality, especially in the daytime, especially in places that are lit properly and things like that, and things that just aren't traditionally very, very dark, it looks great in that respect. But when I use something in like the lower key lighting, or like maybe I want to set up like light tubes and have everything else blacked out, I have to be really, really careful with my shadows and make sure that it doesn't get super noisy. Now, there are noise reductions and things like that, but again, if you've used noise reduction, or if you've used noise reduction at all, you'll know that it takes away from the image a little bit, and it doesn't give you that crispness and that quality that you're looking for. So to have to make that compromise every time based on my camera's inability to translate shadows very well, it's not something I'm super crazy about. So in that regard, the shadows could be improved in terms of that image, but the image still looks really, really good, and I've used it more than once for things where I do have a darker environment. It's just you have to do a couple workarounds. And that's it. There's not a lot of things I dislike about the Canon C200. Actually, there's a lot of things I like about it a lot. And despite the fact that I probably will, based on my needs and based on how things go, I'm probably going to have another camera. Like, I'm probably going to upgrade. I probably will look at some of the new camera bodies that are offered. And that's just the way that technology works. It's just the way that some productions work and things like that, despite having a really good camera, you still have to keep your eyes open for new technologies that may solve some of the problems that sometimes you didn't even know you had. But what I will say is that despite even considering upgrading, I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of the Canon C200. It's a great camera. It's a great price if you're looking at upgrading to a cinema camera and having all the features, or all the baseline features that cinema cameras have to offer. The Canon C200, if you're able to find it aftermarket, is a great addition to your kit. It's a great upgrade to your cinematography, I should say. It's a great upgrade to your filmmaking, and you won't be disappointed with it. You may be a little bit frustrated with how many hard drives you have to buy, but at the end of the day, you'll be very happy with the images it produces, and you'll be very happy with the features that it offers. Now, that all to be said, it's been a while since I've done a YouTube video. I have a bunch of other things coming out. There's actually a few videos where you actually get to see some of the things that I do on set, and some of the projects that I've been working on. So I will be back. I'm going to try my best to, post on this YouTube thing a little bit more often, because I really, really don't. But that being said, this is KY, not Kai the Creative, and I'll see you guys in another video. Peace.